How does the possibility of a claim affect the D&O renewal process for an agent? Susanne Murray of the New York Office of Insurance Broker, HRH, is an expert in directors and officers liability coverage. In this excerpt from the complete interview with Insurance Journals Andy Simpson, Murray goes through how this might affect handling, marketing, even pricing on a renewal.
If something like that were to happen, a circumstance were to arise, and you're coming up on renewal time for that client, what's your role, and what do you tell the carrier, what don't you tell the carrier, and how does that process develop?
Well, bear in mind that for starters, clearly if it's a claim, that's something that you're very much going to want to recommend to your client that they provide notice of to the carrier. If the client has a situation that they think could lead to a claim at some point, you go back to it is still discretionary. Mm-hmm. It's not a claim. If they've uncovered improprieties and that type of thing, that's something we talk through with them. We, however, are not the insurance carrier. We want to make sure that, it's entirely the client's decision. At the renewal time, you talk through the pros and cons to the insured. If you want to provide notice of this under the current policy, then you need to take care that you give the sufficient particulars. If you don't have sufficient particulars, then it's not ready and you can't provide notice to the current carrier. At the time of the renewal, as long as you're already insured, usually you're not going through whether or not you have knowledge of facts or circumstances that could give rise to a claim, because no one's asking that of you, because that's not part of your obligation in the renewal process.
If you did have some of those facts or situations, or it had developed along certain lines, is that a situation that's likely to come up in the renewal that the new carrier or the new underwriter is going to want to exclude that situation from the new policy?
If it's discussed, or bear in mind that at times you're going to get a specific question because a company put out a press release saying that we're investigating, or we're concerned about, we heard about, somebody complained about something, then it's part of the public domain. You could have a carrier asking questions about that. What is this about? Can you explain more? From the client's perspective, or the insured, from the insured's perspective, what that means is, do they have the ability, from a legal perspective, to provide more information? Mm. Is it going to be a violation of securities law and regulation to provide material non-public information in connection with that type of a renewal process? If a carrier understands that, or if they've received notice of a potential claim and they believe that there's a circumstance that exists, it is at times possible that an insurance carrier would want to specifically exclude it. That's not standard, that's not common, that doesn't always happen, but to the extent that an insured was faced with getting some sort of a specific claim exclusion or a specific circumstance exclusion, that would cause the insured to rethink whether or not to provide notice of this circumstance, and frankly to be much more likely to provide notice under the current policy if it's going to be specifically excluded under the next policy. Mm-hmm. So those pros and cons in making that determination can be taken out of their hands if the carrier wants to impose a specific claim or a specific event type of exclusion. That's also a reason why you market a policy. If you have one carrier that wants to demand that, again, if there's clearly a claim, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about a possibility of a claim and a carrier wants to put on an exclusion for the possibility, then you may be talking to other insurance carriers.
Would that substantially reduce the premium necessarily if an exclusion like that were in place?
Actually, that's a really good point that you raised, because sometimes that's a useful negotiating tool to provide notice of circumstances under this policy, because the carriers, even this carrier, but the carriers that you're talking to could well say, well, good, that's a risk I don't run now. You've noticed it here. At renewal, you can't get coverage for it next year or at renewal. So that could make you a more attractive insured during the renewal process.